Okay, so my name is Emily. I'm 28 years old. And what I'm about to tell you is a story about how the people I loved and trusted the most, my own family, systematically tried to tear me down, exclude me, and erase my contributions, all for their own gain. What happened next, the lengths they went to, was even worse than the initial betrayal. But I'm here to tell you the full story, every painful, frustrating, and ultimately empowering detail. If you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, or if you've had to fight for your place and your truth against the people who were supposed to protect you, please let me know in the comments where you're watching from right now. It helps to know we're not alone in these experiences. And if anything I say resonates with you, maybe hits a little too close to home, please hit that like button. It helps this story reach others who might need to hear it. And hey, if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about navigating toxic relationships, finding your voice, and building a life on your own terms, make sure you subscribe. I share new stories every week. So, let's go back to where it all began. For me, the cracks in my family started small, almost imperceptible at first, like hairline fractures in a perfectly painted wall. I grew up in a family that, on the surface, seemed incredibly close. We had Sunday dinners, celebrated holidays together, and always presented a united front to the outside world. My parents were kind, hardworking people who had built a modest but successful small business, a specialized manufacturing company that had been in our family for 2 generations. My grandfather started it, my father took it over, and the unspoken assumption was that eventually I would too. From a young age, I was fascinated by the business. While other kids were playing, I was tagging along with my dad, watching the machines, learning about the process, listening to him talk about suppliers and clients. I wasn't just a kid playing around. I genuinely loved it. I loved the smell of the materials, the hum of the machinery, the sense of creating something tangible. My dad fostered that interest. He taught me about inventory, customer service, even basic accounting in a way that made sense to my young mind. He'd let me help with small tasks like stamping invoices or organizing samples. It felt like my future was being built piece by piece, alongside the products we made. As I got older, this involvement deepened. I worked summers in the factory, learning every role from the ground up. I spent school holidays in the office, understanding the administrative side. By the time I went to college, there was no question in my mind that I would return to the business. I chose a degree in business management with a focus on operations, tailoring my studies specifically to enhance my ability to contribute to the family company. While I was doing this, however, another branch of the family was watching. My father had one sibling, his younger brother, my Uncle John. Uncle John had married my Aunt Carol, and they had one son, my cousin Mark. Mark was about 3 years older than me. Growing up, our interactions were typical cousins, playing together at family gatherings, occasional visits. There was always a subtle undercurrent, though. Aunt Carol seemed perpetually envious of my parents' success. While my dad had inherited the business, he had also grown it significantly through hard work and smart decisions. Uncle John had chosen a different path, a more stable, less entrepreneurial career. There was never open hostility, but I remember noticing how Aunt Carol would often make pointed comments disguised as jokes, usually about how lucky my father was, or how easy he had it. This dynamic became more pronounced as Mark and I grew into adults. Mark, unlike me, had never shown much interest in the family business. He studied something unrelated in college and took a corporate job. But Aunt Carol and Uncle John seemed determined that their son should somehow benefit from the family legacy. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was focused on my own path. After college, I returned home and immediately started working full-time in the business. My father welcomed me, easing me into more significant roles. I was eager, dedicated, and full of new ideas based on my education and observations. I started implementing small changes to improve efficiency, update our systems, and modernize our marketing. My dad was proud of my initiative, and the business saw positive results. This is when I started noticing the shift. It wasn't just Aunt Carol's subtle comments anymore. Uncle John and Mark started showing up at the business more often, asking questions, sometimes even questioning my decisions in front of employees. It felt less like family checking in and more like
Surveillance.
Aunt Carol would call my mother, ostensibly to chat, but the conversations always circled back to the business and what I was doing. My mother, bless her, initially defended me, highlighting my hard work and the improvements I was making. But the constant chipping away, the subtle suggestions that perhaps I was moving too fast or changing things unnecessarily, started to take a toll. Mark, in particular, developed a sudden, performative interest in the company. He dropped by when he knew I was working late, offering unsolicited advice on things he clearly didn't understand. He'd talk loudly about how he would do things differently, usually vague, buzzword-filled ideas he seemed to pick up from his corporate job. It was irritating, but I tried to be patient. He was family after all. I assumed maybe he was just trying to connect or find his place. The first major red flag, the first deep cut, came when my father had a health scare. It wasn't life-threatening, thankfully, but it was serious enough to make him consider succession planning more formally. He called a family meeting, just my parents, me, Uncle John, Aunt Carol, and Mark. I went into the meeting expecting to discuss a timeline for me to take over more responsibility, perhaps a formal handover plan. Instead, I walked into a room where the air felt thick with unspoken agendas. My father started by saying he wanted to ensure the future of the business, that it was his legacy and he wanted it to thrive. He looked at me and smiled, acknowledging my dedication and hard work. My heart swelled. This was it, I thought. This was the moment he would formalize my role. But then Uncle John spoke up. He cleared his throat and said, "Now, brother, we've all seen how hard Emily works and we appreciate that. But running a business is complex. It's a big responsibility. Mark has been in the corporate world. He has a broader perspective, skills in negotiation and strategy that a small, traditional business might not have." I was stunned. My father looked surprised too, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. Aunt Carol quickly jumped in, her voice syrupy sweet. "Yes, dear. Mark has been so successful in his career. He understands modern business practices. Perhaps, for a smooth transition, it would be best if Mark came in, maybe as a co-manager with Emily, just to help guide things initially, offer his expertise." Co-manager? With Mark? Mark, who knew nothing about our specific industry, who had shown interest only recently and superficially. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. This wasn't about helping, this was about inserting themselves, about diminishing my role. I managed to find my voice, though it trembled slightly. "Dad, I've been working here for years. I know this business inside and out. I've implemented changes that have already improved things. I understand the operations, the finances, the client relationships. Mark has no experience in our sector." Uncle John waved a dismissive hand. "Details, Emily, details. Mark has transferable skills. Big picture thinking. That's what the business needs to grow, to compete in today's market. No offense, but you've only ever worked in the business. Mark has worked on businesses at a higher level." Mark, who had been unusually quiet, then spoke. His tone was condescending. "Emily, I appreciate your passion, I do. But you can't deny that the business is a little old-fashioned. I have ideas for scaling, for digital transformation, for optimizing supply chains that are standard in my world. You're too close to it. You might not see the potential." It felt like a coordinated attack. They were using my father's health scare as leverage, spinning my dedication as naivete and my experience as a limitation. They were painting Mark as the modern savior the business desperately needed, and me as the well-meaning but ultimately incapable daughter stuck in the past. My father, caught off guard, tried to mediate. He said he valued both of our contributions, that he hadn't made any final decisions. He ended the meeting somewhat awkwardly, saying he needed time to think. I left that meeting devastated. It wasn't just the suggestion that Mark should have a role. It was the clear implication that I wasn't enough, that my years of dedication and hard work were somehow less valuable than Mark's abstract corporate skills. The people I considered family, my aunt, uncle, and cousin, had shown their true colors. They saw the business, not as a legacy for the next generation to build upon, but as something to be seized, and me as an obstacle. Over the next few weeks, the pressure intensified. Aunt Carol and Uncle John were constantly in my parents' ear. They started spreading subtle rumors within the wider family network and even among some long-term employees who knew them. They'd imply I was making reckless changes, that I was too young or inexperienced to handle the full responsibility, or that I was planning to sell off parts of the business. None of which was true. They highlighted minor setbacks or challenges that are normal in any business as proof of my incompetence. I felt increasingly isolated. Employees I had good relationships with became hesitant around me. Some distant relatives started asking my parents pointed questions about my plans, echoing the concerns Uncle John and Aunt Carol were planting. My parents, while still largely supportive of me, were clearly stressed and worn down by the constant pressure and negativity coming from their side of the family. My mother, in particular, felt trapped between her loyalty to me and the desire to maintain peace with her in-laws. My father, trying to be fair, suggested that Mark come in part-time for a few months to assess things and offer recommendations. I hated the idea, but my father pleaded with me to give it a chance, saying it would shut Uncle John and Aunt Carol up and prove that their concerns were unfounded. Reluctantly, I agreed, mostly to alleviate my father's stress, and because I was naive enough to think Mark's lack of knowledge would quickly become apparent, silencing his parents. That was a mistake. Mark came in, not to learn, but to find flaws. He spent his time observing, taking notes, and pulling employees aside for private conversations. He wasn't trying to understand. He was gathering ammunition. He would challenge my methods, question expenditures I had approved, and generally make his presence disruptive. He'd arrive late, leave early, and spend half the day on his phone, yet act like he was the busiest person there, working on crucial strategic analyses. The exclusion became overt during this period. Mark would sometimes schedule meetings about the future of the business and not invite me, even though I was effectively running the day-to-day operations. When I found out and confronted him or my father, they would backtrack, saying it was just preliminary or they didn't want to bother me with hypothetical discussions. But the message was clear. They were trying to cut me out of the decision-making loop. The most painful part was the feeling of being deliberately misunderstood and misrepresented. They twisted my words, attributed motivations to me that I didn't have, and actively erased my contributions. If I implemented a new process that saved time, they'd say Mark's fresh perspective inspired the need for change, ignoring the fact that I'd been researching and planning it for months. If a client was happy, it was attributed to the business's long-standing reputation, not my efforts in maintaining the relationship. If there was a problem, however minor, it was proof of my inexperience. I felt like I was living in a parallel reality. In my reality, I was working tirelessly, implementing improvements, and demonstrating my capability. In their reality, I was an obstacle, a naive girl playing at business, holding back the company from its true potential which, coincidentally, only Mark could unlock. I tried talking to my parents again, more forcefully this time. I explained how Mark and his parents were actively undermining me, how they weren't trying to help but to take over. My father, bless him, finally saw it clearly. He had been trying to keep the peace, but the blatant attempts to sideline me were undeniable. He told Mark that the co-management idea was off the table and that I was his chosen successor. This did not go over well. Uncle John and Aunt Carol reacted with outrage. They accused my father of being unfair, of favoring me simply because I was his daughter, ignoring my actual qualifications and dedication. They claimed he was jeopardizing the family legacy by leaving it in my unproven hands. The conflict escalated dramatically. They stopped coming to family dinners. Aunt Carol sent scathing emails and texts to my mother, criticizing me, my parents, and the business. Uncle John started contacting some of our oldest clients and suppliers, subtly suggesting that there might be instability at the company under my leadership and that they should consider diversifying who they worked with. This was a direct attempt to harm the business I loved and had worked so hard for. Mark, meanwhile, wrote a formal report based on his brief, disruptive time at the company. This report was full of inaccuracies, misinterpretations, and outright falsehoods, painting a grim picture of the business under my management and conveniently highlighting areas where he could step in and save it. He presented this report not just to my father, but also sent copies to several key employees and even posted vague, damaging statements on professional networking sites that could be easily linked to our company, implying mismanagement and a lack of vision. This was the deepest betrayal. They weren't just being difficult family members. They were actively trying to sabotage my career and the business my family had built. The exclusion wasn't just social, it was a calculated professional attack. They wanted to isolate me, discredit me, and force me out so Mark could step in. I was devastated, but also incandescent with rage. How could family do this? How could they prioritize their own perceived entitlement and greed over familial bonds, loyalty, and truth? This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about a fundamental violation of trust and decency. My initial reaction was hurt and shock, followed by a desperate need to defend myself and the truth. I spent days gathering evidence, emails, performance reports showing the positive impact of my work, witness accounts from loyal employees who saw what Mark was doing. I drafted a detailed response to Mark's report, refuting every false claim with data and facts. My father saw my determination and, finally, the severity of the situation. He was furious with his brother and sister-in-law for their actions. He realized their intentions were malicious. He supported my efforts to counter their narrative. The climax of this excruciating period came during another attempted family meeting, this time at a neutral location, brokered by a desperate mutual relative who hoped to mend fences. It was tense from the moment we all sat down. Uncle John and Aunt Carol came in with an air of injured innocence, as if they were the wronged party. Mark looked smug, confident that his fabricated report had done its damage. The conversation quickly devolved. Uncle John started listing off the points from Mark's report, repeating the lies about my supposed incompetence and the business's decline under my management. Aunt Carol nodded along, adding fuel to the fire with passive-aggressive comments about my youthful arrogance. I had prepared myself. I took a deep breath, clutching the binder containing my evidence. My voice was steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. "Everything you are saying is false," I stated calmly. "And I have proof." I went through their claims one by one, presenting the data that contradicted them. I showed the financial reports indicating growth, the efficiency metrics showing improvement, the positive client feedback I had gathered. I read excerpts from Mark's report and then presented the actual figures or events that proved he had either lied or grossly misrepresented the situation. I revealed that Uncle John had been contacting clients and suppliers, showing printed emails that had been forwarded to us by people loyal to my father. The air in the room grew thick with tension. Uncle John and Aunt Carol's faces went from smugness to disbelief, then to anger. Mark started to protest, stammering denials. "You're twisting things, Emily," Aunt Carol shrieked. "You're making us look bad." "I'm not making you look bad, Aunt Carol," I replied, my voice gaining strength. "You're doing that yourselves. By lying, by trying to sabotage the business, by trying to hurt me." Uncle John leaned forward, his face red. "This is family. You don't air dirty laundry like this. We were just trying to help." "Help," I echoed, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. "Is that what you call trying to destroy my reputation and steal what my father built? Is that what you call spreading lies and trying to turn people against me? That's not help. That's malice." I looked at Mark.
"And you, Mark?"
"My cousin. I thought you were family. But you came into the business not to learn, not to help, but to gather false information, to fabricate a report designed to discredit me."
"Why?"
"Because you felt entitled to something you didn't earn? Because your parents convinced you this was the easy way to success." He didn't answer directly, just mumbled something about opportunities and potential. My father finally spoke, his voice heavy with disappointment. "John, Carol, Mark, I heard you out. I try to find a way for us all to get along. But your actions contacting clients, spreading those rumors, this report, it goes beyond anything I could have imagined from family. It wasn't about helping, it was about taking. Emily has proven her dedication, her skill, and her integrity, especially now by standing up to this. I have made my decision. Emily will take over the business when I retire. There is no place for Mark here, not after this. And honestly, there is no place for any of you in my life or Emily's if this is how you behave. The meeting ended with shouting, tears, mostly from Aunt Carol, performing distress, and accusations. They stormed out, vowing never to speak to us again. It was messy, painful, and heart-wrenching to witness such a complete breakdown, but it was also necessary. The truth was out, and I had defended myself and my place. In the aftermath, there was a profound silence. The calls, the emails, the subtle manipulation stopped. The air felt lighter, but also colder. A part of my family was gone, replaced by an empty space filled with the echoes of betrayal. This period forced me into deep introspection. I had spent so long trying to earn their approval, trying to fit into a family structure that was ultimately conditional on my compliance with their hidden agendas. I realized that their behavior wasn't about me being insufficient. It was about their own insecurities, their own greed, their own twisted sense of entitlement. They hadn't excluded me because I wasn't capable. They had excluded me because I was capable and stood in the way of what they wanted. Setting boundaries became my priority. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about protecting my emotional well-being. It meant accepting that the family I thought I had, the unconditional love and support I believed was there, was largely an illusion, at least from that branch of the family. It was incredibly difficult to grieve the loss of a relationship with people who were still alive, but who had proven they were not safe or trustworthy. I decided to take a significant step. While my father was still officially in charge, we agreed that I needed to establish my own identity and value, separate from the family conflict. The idea of taking over the business, while still the plan, now felt heavy with the weight of the conflict. It was our family business, but their actions had poisoned it. Inspired by the technologies and market gaps I had identified while working in the family business, and armed with the confidence I had gained from successfully defending myself, I made a bold decision. I decided to start my own company, leveraging my expertise but focusing on a new, innovative approach within the sector. It was a massive risk, but I felt a powerful pull towards building something that was entirely mine, free from the toxicity and baggage of the family drama. I used my savings, secured a small loan, and poured every ounce of my energy, knowledge, and passion into this new venture. It was terrifying and exhilarating. I worked harder than I ever had before, building a business plan, finding a small workspace, sourcing materials, and reaching out to potential clients. Word of my new company eventually got back to Uncle John, Aunt Carol, and Mark. Their reaction was a mix of disdain and disbelief. They saw it as a temporary rebellion, something I would fail at, confirming their narrative of my supposed incompetence. They continued their subtle negative campaign, suggesting I was being reckless, biting the hand that fed me, and that my venture was doomed to fail. They tried to spread rumors that I was using family business contacts inappropriately, which I wasn't. I was building my own network. But this time, their words didn't cut as deeply. I was too focused on building something positive. I had set my boundaries. Their negativity was their problem, not mine. I surrounded myself with a small team of supportive, talented people who believed in my vision. I built relationships with clients based on trust and delivering results, not on family connections. My new business started to gain traction. My innovative approach resonated with clients. We landed our first major contract, then another. We were growing slowly but surely. I was proving, through tangible success, everything they had tried to deny about me. About a year into running my own company, completely separate from the family business, something happened that felt like the ultimate, unexpected validation. Not a VP announcement in the traditional sense, but something equally significant in my world. An industry association, one that my family's business had been a part of for decades, but where my father had always maintained a low profile, reached out to me. They had heard about my new company, about the innovative solutions we were offering, and the positive reputation I was quickly building. They invited me to speak at their annual conference, a major event in our industry. They didn't invite my father, who had been a member for years. They didn't invite Mark, who fancied himself a business guru. They invited me. Standing on that stage, Sharing my story, my vision, and the successes of my new company felt incredibly powerful. It wasn't just a professional milestone, it was a personal triumph. I was being recognized, validated, and celebrated for my work, my ideas, and my integrity by an objective third party with no family bias. It was the antithesis of everything Uncle John, Aunt Carol, and Mark had tried to do to me. They had tried to make me small, invisible, and incapable. Here I was standing tall, visible, and undeniably capable. News of my speaking engagement and the positive reception I received spread through the industry and, inevitably, back to my estranged relatives. I didn't hear from them directly, but I heard through the grapevine that they were furious and embarrassed. Their narrative of my failure had been publicly dismantled by my success. This moment wasn't just about external validation, it solidified my internal shift. I no longer needed their approval. Their attempts to exclude and diminish me had inadvertently pushed me to build something even better, something that was wholly mine and a true reflection of my abilities. The betrayal hurt deeply, and the scars remain, but it also forced me to find my own strength and define my own worth, independent of their toxic opinions. My relationship with my parents is stronger than ever. My father is immensely proud of me, not just for starting my own business, but for how I handled the situation with grace and strength. My mother found her voice too, distancing herself from her brother and sister-in-law's negativity. We still have family dynamics to navigate, but the core unit is solid. As for Uncle John, Aunt Carol, and Mark, there's been minimal contact. Brief, awkward encounters at very large, unavoidable family functions, marked by strained smiles and averted gazes. They never apologized. I don't expect them to. An apology would require an acknowledgement of their actions and the pain they caused, and I don't believe they are capable of that level of introspection or humility. I've accepted that the relationship with that part of my family is irrevocably changed. It's a loss, yes, but it's also a necessary distance to protect my peace and my progress. I learned that sometimes, the people who are supposed to be your biggest supporters can be your biggest obstacles, driven by their own unresolved issues. I learned that protecting your energy and your truth is paramount, even when it means creating distance from family. The exclusion and betrayal were painful, but they also served as a catalyst. They forced me to trust my instincts, to stand up for myself, and to forge my own path when the one I thought was laid out for me was poisoned. The VP announcement, my moment of public recognition and success, wasn't just a vindication, it was a testament to resilience, a symbol that their efforts to diminish me had failed, and that I had emerged stronger and more successful on my own terms. My business is thriving now. I'm able to hire people, contribute to the economy, and make a real difference in my industry. I built it from the ground up, with integrity and hard work, the values my parents truly instilled in me. And that, far more than any family inheritance or title, is my true legacy. So, that's my story. It's raw, and it's still emotional to talk about, but it's my truth. And speaking it, sharing it, is part of my continued healing and empowerment. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced similar challenges with family or felt excluded and misunderstood, please share your experience in the comments below. It's incredibly powerful to connect with others who understand. If my journey from feeling undermined to finding my own validation struck a chord, please hit that like button. Your support means a lot. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming adversity, setting boundaries, and finding your strength against the odds, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Remember, your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion or validation, especially not those who seek to diminish you. Speak your truth, trust yourself, and build a life that is authentically yours. You are stronger than you think.